what's popping, everybody? I am back with another episode of Key to the Streets. I've been on vacation for the past week, and I missed a couple Key to the Streets videos, but I'm back to bring the value. Vacation was great, if you were wondering. It was cool to finally get away. I've literally been going nonstop for a whole entire year. This time last year was the last time that I took a break, and I'm talking about long long weekends or anything I haven't done anything like that for a whole year straight. I just been straight grinding for a whole year straight. So I had to check out for a little bit, checked out for a week. It was good to kind of collect my thoughts and unwind. And also there was some things in the business that got brought to my attention that we need to automate a little bit more. That's the cool thing about going on vacation. It's like a test of your automation. So it's cool. There's some good things that come from vacation. I suggest you guys go on a vacation, because a lot of good things come from it. But today we're going to go over what is in our contracts to protect us, and just, the fluff that's in our contracts, just like the stuff that you might not think of, right? I had it brought to my attention from another wholesaler, came to me and said, "Hey, Mike, I don't really get exactly what should be in my contract." So I'm going to go over that, all the things that we put in our contract, at least the important stuff. There's a lot of other just fluff that's in our contracts as well, but I'm going to give you all some sauce on how we protect ourselves in our contracts and how our contracts are written up. So let's get into it. So let's start off. This is what's in a contract. So to begin, before we go over what's in the contract, I think it'll be beneficial to let you guys understand what a contract is. A contract is essentially the instructions that the attorneys or the title company or whatever type of state you're in, that's the information that they need to know in order to perform the transaction, right? So it's essentially just like some notes for the attorneys or closing for the title company to know in order to get the deal done. So this is what information we give them in order to get the deal done. Just a couple simple things in the beginning. We obviously give the address. So we let them know we're buying 123 Main Street, right? We don't have to put in the crazy numbers and parcel numbers and all that type of stuff unless it's a piece of land. But typically all we put is the address, and we let them take care of the rest. We put our purchase price. We're buying the house for $100,000 or whatever it is. They know that. And then we put in a closing date. Okay. So in our closing date, right, we'll say something like 30 days post executed P&S. So 30 days after, and every single deal is different. So we don't just do 30 days, depends on the whole situation. But 30 days after an executed P&S means after both us, the buyer, and the seller sign. So if the seller signs today and we don't sign until tomorrow, then boom, that means 30 days after tomorrow. So post executed P&S or sooner. So we'll typically just do 30 days, and if we can do it sooner than that, then we do. Now, what else do we put? We put our earnest money deposit, especially in Massachusetts. I'm not too sure for every other state, but I know in Massachusetts, if you do not put any EMD down, any earnest money, if it's not tied to any type of money at all, the agreement is not legal. You have to put some sort of money up. This could be $1, honestly, but you have to put something up. For us, we're doing more than $1. Typically on every single deal, we're doing about $1,000. Then if we're wholesaling the deal, what we'll do is we'll have our buyer bring in $10,000, and we use of that 10,000, we use that $1,000 for EMD. That's typically what we'll do. But usually what we do for EMD is $1,000 on all of our deals. So we put our EMD down. What else do we put? We put obviously the buyer and seller. So we'll put our name, Silver Homes, and the seller, John Doe. We put that. We also put the closing attorney, who we are going to use for the closing. Now, what we do for this is we usually put something like buyer's choice. That way we have the choice. So let's just say we end up contacting our attorneys and they're super busy or something like that. We can use one of our other attorneys or whatever the case is. So we always type in buyer's choice here. That way we're in control, because we essentially want our attorneys to facilitate everything. It's the best when our attorneys represent the seller as well. So one thing that we'll say to the seller is we'll say, hey, if you use our attorneys, we'll be willing to cover all the closing costs. So we don't just say right out that we're going to cover the closing costs. We say if you use our attorneys, then we'll cover the closing costs. That way, our attorneys know exactly what's going on and they facilitate everything. They do the HUD statement correctly to pertain to both parties, and it just makes it much easier for all parties. So we do that. Now we're getting into some of the weeds, right? We're going to put in an inspection period. So this inspection period is the time for us that we get our contractors in there, our buyers in there for wholesaling the deal. It's the time for us to do our due diligence, essentially. And what we put in this inspection period and in another little piece of our contract is we put, hey, if we figure out in these 14 days, typically we're doing a 14-day inspection period. If we figure out in these 14 days that, you know, the rehab is going to be too much, or we don't have a buyer for it, or whatever the case is, we can back out of this deal and get our earnest money back. So we have a paragraph in there that states that. So our inspection period just states that we have, you know, we have the right to inspect the property. This also comes along with access. In ours, we say we need a 24-hour notice for access. Okay, so we can get access to the property within a 24-hour period at any moment in order to get a lender in there or buyer in there or contractor in there or whatever. We have access to do that. If they breach any of that, then we're in breach of contract, right? They are in breach of contract. Like, they breached the contract, and essentially that's illegal. So we have to get access to the property, and that's our time, like I said, to get our buyers in there and whatever. So we have that. Another thing that we have is additional terms. So these additional terms can be anything. In these additional terms, there can be things that help us out, help the seller out, help both parties out. Like sometimes when you do cash for keys, you put that in the additional terms, or let's just say there was like a really expensive car involved or something like that. You could put in the additional terms that the car is staying on the property and that we're inheriting the car or something like that. Something that is different about the deal, you put in the additional terms. Okay. Another thing, we put closing costs. Who are in charge of the closing costs? Now, typically, like I just told you, we'll end up taking care of the closing cost if they use our attorneys. And even if they don't use our attorneys, we'll probably cover it as well. We just use that as a sales pitch to have them use our attorneys. So we say, hey, if you're going to use our attorneys, we're going to cover the closing costs. But we put it in our contract nicely in there, so that it's almost like a sales tactic when we are covering. We talk about this in the sales call before we go over the contract, but when we're covering the closing costs, it's nice right there with a big X. It says, hey, buyer to pay all the closing costs. And as you're going through it with the seller, as you're going through the contract with the seller, you say, oh yeah, and we're going to cover all your closing costs. And boom, it's another selling point for the deal. So we put that in our contracts. Another thing, let's look. The title status. We let it be known, hey, you have to clear title if we're going to buy this property. So if there are any liens or whatever the case is that need to be taken care of, you have to take care of them before we come in and buy this property, or else you are in breach of contract. So they have to deliver us a clear title. So to back up, when we open escrow, the attorneys will run title. They'll look at everything. They'll look at all the liens on the property, all the mortgages, all the previous history of ownership and everything of the property to make sure all the deeds were transferred correctly before. They look at any and everything that could come up in the future to make sure that the title is clear. So we tell the seller, hey, you have to get this title to be clear, or else you're in breach of contract. Okay. So we'll ask that in our calls, right? In our sales calls. Hey, are there any liens on the property or anything like that that we should know about? Right. Because they know. They know if they have a mechanic's lien of $20,000, that they're just acting like they don't know, right? And they think that we're going to take care of it for them or something. That's not happening. Okay. This is a cool one. Not a lot of people notice this one. I mean, know this one. I said notice because it's called notice. Cure notice. What a cure notice is really important. This essentially states, hey, if we default on this contract, like we don't abide by the contract, you have to send us in writing a cure notice, essentially saying, hey, you have to cure your default in the next 10 days. And if you don't, then you are in breach of contract. So let's just say we come to the closing day, right? And for some reason, our buyer backs out. Our buyer backs out on the last day, okay? The seller has to essentially send us a notice in the mail. And from the day that we receive that mail, that piece of mail, that notice has to say, hey, you're in breach of contract. You have to cure the default that you did. You have to cure that in the next 10 days. So this is 10 days. And if we don't do that in the next 10 days, if we don't find a buyer, we don't close on it in the next 10 days, we are now in breach of contract, and that's illegal. And now the contract is not, is null and void, and it's just very bad. Okay. So, but this allows us to cure it. This allows us to be like, hey, now we have 10 days to make sure a buyer gets in there and buy it, or we buy it ourselves, or whatever the case is. Right. So that cure notice is super, super important. Another thing we put in there is assignment. Okay. Assignment, we let them know, hey, we can assign this deal to another buyer or to another entity or to another partner or whatever the case is. This allows us to assign the contract. Now, as far as I know, in Massachusetts, if I know this is valid in Massachusetts, I'm saying I don't know if it's valid anywhere else in the country, but in Massachusetts, you don't have to put this. You don't have to put the assignment verbiage in there. Every single contract is assignable unless it states that it isn't in Massachusetts. That's what I know. However, we put it in there just in case, and especially because we do deals nationwide. On all of our contracts, we just put that, hey, we have the right to assign the deal. And when it comes up and the seller's like, well, hey, what the heck? You're assigning this deal? Like, what's going on? Or sometimes we have a ton of deals going on and we have to have another partner bring in their crew and we outsource the rehab to them and they do the deal with us, right? So sometimes we do that just depending on how many deals we got going on. Just so to protect us both, we put that in there, okay? And then this is my favorite one, and this will be the last one. A memorandum. So what a memorandum is, it essentially, so we put in, before I go into what a memorandum is, we put in there that we have the right to file a memorandum, okay? And you have to do this because if you don't put this in your contract, then it is illegal to go file a memorandum and your memorandum is not valid. So you have to put it in your contract that the seller agrees that you can file a memorandum. And if you don't put that in your contract, then your memorandum is not valid, okay? So you have to put that verbiage in there. But what a memorandum is, it essentially is something that you can bring down to the county recording office and you can record it against the property. And when somebody goes to run title, they will see that you have interest in the property. It states that you can buy this house and only you can buy this house because you're the person that has it under contract and you're the person with the interest in the property. Nobody else can buy it, okay? Now, this process in order to file a memorandum is different in every single county. In my county, we actually have to get the purchase and sale agreement notarized. And if we don't get the purchase and sale agreement notarized, then we can't file the memorandum. Okay, so you have to know in your county what the process is in order to file a memorandum if you're going to file memorandums, but it's super important to file memorandums. I'll do a whole video on memorandums some other day, but essentially a memorandum allows you to be the only person that can buy the property. Another buyer can't swoop in. They can't, renegotiate with another buyer for a higher price or whatever the case is. They cannot do that. They can't ghost you. They can ghost you. It's just they won't be able to sell the property without going through you. Essentially, that's what a memorandum is. There's a bunch of other things in our contract. Our contract is like our regular cash contract. It's like 4 pages long. And it's super simple, but there's a lot of fluff in there. It's fairly straightforward, though. We try to make it as digestible as possible for the seller so that the seller doesn't get spooked out and see a whole entire 20-page purchase and sale agreement. And they're like, what the heck? We don't do that. We just try to condense everything into like 4 pages. Bada bing, bada boom, we get it done. So I hope this video brought y'all some value. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions on contracts or anything like that, feel free to shoot me a DM on Instagram at @the Mike Gomes. I appreciate y'all. Peace.